So here we are with the next part of the test. And again, we get hit with two graphing functions. If you just remember the basics, you should be able to select the proper function. So in this case, what we have is, you see the shift of -2, that makes -2 in this case your asymptote. So in terms of, drawing yourself a visual asymptote, and then we know that when x is 0, this becomes e to the 3 times 0, which is the same as e to the 0, which is 1, leaving you 1 minus 2, final answer -1. So we know that this value goes through here. And then the other issue is simply just that the graph goes this way, right? And so the behavior of the graph should be known to you as it is. And then for number 28, you notice for number 28, the e to the x is negative. You also notice that there is a positive 3 here. So guess what? Positive 3 is your asymptote for this one. And because this is a negative in front of the e to the negative x, it flips around and rotates over. So it does that behavior. And it should be going through this point here, because you end up with 3 minus 1 to give you 2 when x is equal to 0. So that's equal to your y. And so, yeah, so in the behavior, actually, it doesn't go that wide out. Excuse me, that's just me being a dork. This should sort of have that behavior. Okay? So remember, not only is it a negative e, it's also got a negative x exponent. Alright, let's look at number 29. So for number 29, they're giving you a decimal equivalent. We know that one of the values is n is 0, so that when n is 0, all of this zaps out to 1. So we know the lead number has to be 200 regardless. So you could get rid of that one. And now just plug in the 5 and you get 200 times 2, and this is the key. This times 2 separates that function. So this becomes -6 times 5. And so you end up with negative 0.30, I believe, at the top, times 2 raised to that. And then 200 times this value ends up giving you 25. So B should be your answer for that one. Okay, for number 30, it's the same thing. At 0, we have 2200. So it's this one, or this one. Forget about that. Alright, because this part did become 1. 5 to the 0 is 1 times 2200. Then they ask you to plug in 4. So then you say, okay, then 2200. Key. 5 to the 4th is its own calculation. That times 2200 yields you your final answer, which is 1,375,000. Okay? You would do the same for these guys. For 31, you should get C, and for 32, you should also have C. So try it out on your own, using your calculator, and we'll touch base if you have issues from there on. Okay. So evaluate the expression without a calculator. Okay, here's what you know. We have to evaluate this first, right? And so to evaluate that first, we have to find, or we have to remember the rule that this is log base 5 equal to x, which means 5 to the x has to equal 5 to the 1. So that tells me that this value is actually equal to 1, right? So that means that I have log base 7, 1. Well, the only way that is true is that if 7 to the x to be 1 would mean that x would have to be 0. So that would be your answer. Okay? 7 to the x, for that to be 1, that has to be 7 to the 0 is equal to 1. Therefore, your answer is 0. Okay, same thing for this one. So for this one, a to the 0 has to be equal to x minus 3. Well, a to the 0 should be 1, and if that's equal to x minus 3, then x has to be equal to 4, and that should be your answer choice for 34, and that should be B. For number 35, 4 to the 1 power has to equal this. So 4 is equal to x squared minus 9x plus 22, which means that I'm going to subtract that 4 on both sides. I'm going to get x squared minus 9x equals 8. X squared minus 9x plus 18, right? Two factors that multiply to give you 18, but add up to give you a 9. I'm thinking 6 and 3. So x minus 3 times x minus 6. That works. And so using that information, your answer choice should be B. So you set these both to 0, so x equals positive 3, and here x equals positive 6. Always the opposite sign. Alright. Let me try to do 2 more, and let's see if this will hold. Okay, here they want you to graph the following function. And so if you notice that there is a shift of plus 2, which means that this line right here is going to be a cutoff. We do know that if we substitute in values such as 0 and so on, we'll get y values. So for example, log base 5 of 0 plus 2 equals, well, log base 5 of 2 equals what number? Right? And so 5 to what number equals 2? And obviously that's going to give you or yield you a decimal. If I start with negative 1, let's use negative 1 in here, you would end up with, let's see here, you should end up with a 0 going through here. So at negative 1 we have a 0 value, and so this graph should look something like this, going through here and just rising just somewhere here. Alright, it's a little quirky. Let me erase this. And this is plug and play. Just once you get 1 or 2 points, that should be sufficient. Okay, so for 38 we have a little bit of a different function here. We do have for 38 a graph that is going to look something like this, because it's a log of a positive. Remember, these are all base 10. And so the value should look something along this line where it will go like this. Okay, and that's just plug and play. Remember, these are absolute values, so they're all positives. You can use your calculator to check them out. Okay, I'm gonna stop the tape here. Let me try the next grouping at another